Sir, are you okay? The street cleaner lifted his head slowly. His hands were shaking. I haven't eaten since yesterday. He said quietly, I just need a little water. Bianca froze. She looked back at her house, then at the bottle in her hand. It was the last one she had for the day. She stepped forward anyway. Please, she said softly, pressing it into his hands. Take it. The man stared at her like no one had ever done that for him before. She had no idea that the man she just helped wasn't a street cleaner at all, and that this single act of kindness would put her on a path she could never turn back from. King William stood at the tall glass window of his palace study, watching the city of Charleston spread out below him like a living map. The morning sun painted the buildings gold, but his heart carried a weight that no amount of beauty could lift. His only son, Prince Nathaniel, was 29 years old now, tall, educated, kind-hearted, a son any father would be proud of. But there was one thing missing, a wife. It was not that women did not want Nathaniel. The problem was that too many wanted him for reasons that had nothing to do with who he really was. They saw the palace, they saw the expensive cars, they saw the crown, and the influence and the wealth that could change their lives overnight. But they did not see Nathaniel, the man. They did not see the soul behind the title. King William remembered his own late wife, Queen Josephine, who had passed away 7 years ago after a long battle with illness. She had loved him back when he was just a history professor at the State University, long before his older brother died without an heir and left him the throne. Josephine had loved him when he wore old jackets with patches on the elbows and carried stacks of books under his arm. She had loved the man, not the crown that came later. On the night before she died, lying in that hospital bed with tubes and machines around her, Josephine had held his hand with what little strength she had left. Her voice was weak, but her words were strong. Williams, she had whispered, promised me something important. When Nathaniel is ready to marry, do not let him choose a woman who loves the throne more than the man. Find him someone with a pure heart, someone who would love him even if he had nothing. That is the only kind of love that will last. Before we continue, take a second to subscribe if stories like this matter to you. And in the comments, tell us where you're watching from and what time it is for you right now. Those words had lived in King William's mind every single day since her death. He watched his son meet woman after woman, daughters of senators, fashion models, television personalities, businesswomen with designer clothes and perfect smiles. All of them arrived at the palace with their hair styled perfectly and their jewelry sparkling under the chandeliers. All of them asked questions about the royal budget before they asked about Nathaniel's dreams. All of them laughed too loudly at jokes that were not funny and touched his arm a little too often. Nathaniel was polite to all of them. He had been raised to be respectful, but King William saw the emptiness in his son's eyes after each meeting. He saw how Nathaniel would retreat to his room and sit alone, staring out at the city, searching for something real in a world that felt increasingly fake. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon and painted the sky in shades of purple and orange, King William sat with his son in the palace library. The room smelled of old books and leather. It was their favorite place to talk, away from the guards and servants and the endless formality of royal life. Nathaniel, the king said slowly, setting down the book he had been pretending to read. "Can I ask you something honest?" Nathaniel looked up from his own book. "Of course, Father. Always. Are you tired of this? The parade of women who come here pretending to care about you?" Nathaniel was quiet for a long moment. Then he closed his book and let out a heavy sigh. "Yes, Father, I am exhausted by it. Sometimes I wish I could just walk through the city as a normal person, meet someone who does not know my name or my title, someone who would talk to me because they want to, not because I am a prince." King Williams nodded slowly. An idea had been forming in his mind for weeks now, and hearing his son's words made it feel more right than ever. "What if we could make that happen?" the king asked quietly. Nathaniel raised an eyebrow. "What do you mean?" King Williams leaned forward, his eyes serious but filled with a strange kind of excitement. "What if I went out into the city, not as a king, but as an ordinary man? What if I dressed as someone people look down on, someone they ignore or treat poorly? A street cleaner, perhaps? A garbage collector? Someone invisible?" Nathaniel stared at his father like he had just suggested flying to the moon. "You want to disguise yourself as a poor worker?" "Yes," King William said firmly. "Your mother once told me that you can see a person's true character by how they treat someone who can do absolutely nothing for them. If I go out there as a street cleaner, someone people think is beneath them, I will see who has a real heart and who does not. And when I find a woman with true kindness, with genuine compassion, I will bring her here for you to meet." Nathaniel was silent. Part of him thought the idea was completely crazy, but another part of him, the part that was bone-tired of fake conversations and empty smiles, felt a small spark of hope for the first time in months. "Father," he said carefully, "if you are going to do this, please promise me you will be safe. The streets can be dangerous." King William smiled and reached across to squeeze his son's shoulder. "I will be careful, but I must do this. For you, for your future, for the memory of your mother, and the promise I made to her." That night, King Williams lay awake in his royal bed, staring at the ceiling, thinking about what he was about to do. It was risky. It was unconventional. Kings did not dress as street cleaners and walk among their people in disguise, but it felt necessary. It felt like the only way to find what his son truly needed. The next morning, King Williams woke up before dawn. The sky outside was still dark, with just a hint of gray beginning to show on the horizon. The palace was quiet. The guards were still stationed at their posts, half asleep. The servants had not yet begun their morning routines. He moved quietly through the corridors to the oldest storage room in the palace, a place filled with forgotten things from decades past. Inside, covered in dust, were clothes that workers had worn long ago. Maintenance uniforms, cleaning supplies, things that had been stored away and never looked at again. King William searched through the piles until he found what he needed: a pair of faded blue work pants with stains on the knees, a gray shirt that had once been white but had turned dingy with age and washing, a worn-out jacket with frayed sleeves, a baseball cap that was stained and bent out of shape. He put them all on slowly, feeling strange in clothes he had not worn anything like since he was a young man. He looked at himself in a small, dusty mirror, leaning against the wall. The man staring back at him did not look like a king. He looked like someone who worked hard for very little money, someone who struggled to pay bills, someone people would walk passed on the street without a second glance. King Williams took a deep breath. Then he slipped out through a rarely used side exit of the palace, avoiding the main gates where guards would have questioned him. The early morning air was cool and damp. The city was just beginning to wake up. He walked slowly through the streets of Charleston, carrying a large black garbage bag and a stick with a metal hook on the end, the kind street cleaners used to pick up litter from the gutters. His heart pounded in his chest. He had not walked among regular people like this in over 15 years, not since before he became king. At first, no one paid any attention to him. He was invisible, just another poor worker doing a dirty job that needed to be done. Then a young businessman in an expensive suit walked past, talking loudly on his phone about a deal he had just closed. Without even looking, the man tossed an empty coffee cup directly onto the sidewalk right in front of King Williams. The king bent down and picked up the cup, placing it carefully in his garbage bag. The businessman did not even glance at him, did not say thank you, did not acknowledge that another human being existed in front of him. King Williams felt a small sting in his chest. Is this how people treat those they think are beneath them? Is this the world we have created? He continued walking, moving from street to street, picking up bottles, cans, scraps of paper, cigarette butts. Some people ignored him completely. Others looked at him with barely concealed disgust, as if his presence somehow offended them. Near a bus stop, a woman wearing heavy makeup and expensive jewelry was waiting. When she saw King Williams approaching with his garbage bag, she immediately stepped several feet away, wrinkling her nose in disgust. "Stay over there with that filthy bag," she said sharply, her voice full of contempt. "You people always smell like trash." King William said nothing. He simply moved to the other side of the street and continued his work. But inside, his heart was taking careful notes. This woman, with all her gold and perfume and designer clothes, had no kindness whatsoever in her soul. He walked for hours, moving through different neighborhoods. In the wealthy areas, people shooed him away from their shop fronts, saying his presence was bad for business. In the middle-class areas, people simply ignored him, acting as if he did not exist. A group of teenagers on their way to school laughed and pointed at him, making jokes about the old trash man, who probably smelled worse than the garbage he collected. By midday, King Williams was tired. His back ached from bending over. His hands were dirty despite the old gloves he wore. His feet hurt from walking on hard pavement. But he kept going. He had not yet found what he was searching for. Then, as he turned on to a quieter residential street, lined with small, modest houses, he saw her. A young woman was sweeping the front yard of a tiny house that looked like it had seen better days. The paint was peeling, the fence was crooked, the roof had a few missing shingles, but the yard was clean, and someone had planted flowers in old coffee cans along the walkway, trying to bring a little beauty to the poverty. The woman herself wore simple clothes that had been washed so many times the colors had faded. Her dark hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail. She moved slowly, carefully, like someone who was exhausted but determined to finish the work anyway. As King Williams walked closer, he saw a small child, maybe 5 or 6 years old, run out of the house. The boy was holding a toy robot, but one of the arms was broken off and dangling by a wire. "Mama," the boy said, his voice full of disappointment, "can you fix Mr. Robot?" The young woman stopped sweeping and knelt down to her son's level. She took the toy gently in her hands and examined it carefully. Her face was tender, patient. "Oh, sweetheart," she said softly, "I think Mr. Robot is hurt pretty badly, but I will try to fix him tonight after you go to bed. Okay? If I cannot fix him, I promise that when I get paid next week, we will find you another toy. I promise." The little boy's face fell, but he nodded bravely. "Okay, Mama. Thank you." King William stood there watching this small moment. There was something about the way this woman spoke to her child, something genuine and loving, no impatience, no anger, about a broken toy, just pure, patient love. The woman stood up and noticed King William standing there on the sidewalk. For a moment, their eyes met. She did not look disgusted like the woman at the bus stop. She did not look afraid or suspicious. She just looked tired, like someone carrying heavy burdens. "Good morning," she said politely, her voice soft. "Good morning, ma'am," King Williams replied, keeping his voice rough and low, trying to sound like a man who had spent years working outside in all kinds of weather. The woman glanced at his garbage bag and the collection stick in his hand. "You have been working since early this morning, I suppose?" He nodded. "Yes, ma'am. Long day already." She disappeared into the house for a moment. King William stood there, wondering what she was doing. Then she came back, carrying a plastic bottle of water. It was not cold, it was not fancy, but it was clean and full. "Here," she said, holding it out to him with both hands, almost like an offering. "You must be very thirsty. Please take this." King Williams was stunned. He stared at the bottle, then at her face. She was not doing this because anyone was watching. There were no cameras, no audience, no one to impress, just a simple act of kindness from someone who probably had very little to give. "Thank you," he said, his voice thick with emotion he had to hide. "Thank you very much, ma'am. God bless you." She smiled a small, tired smile. "It is nothing. We all need help sometimes. God bless you too, sir." Before he could say anything more, a harsh voice cut through the air from inside the house. "Bianca, what are you doing out there? Are you wasting our water on some street beggar?" A large woman with a hard, angry face appeared in the doorway. Her arms were crossed over her chest. Her eyes were sharp and mean. "Mama Ruth, he looked thirsty," Bianca said quietly, her head lowering slightly. "It is just a little water." "Just a little water?" the older woman snapped. "We barely have enough for ourselves, and you are giving it away to strangers who do not even matter? Do you think water is free? Do you think we are rich?" King William saw shame wash over Bianca's face, but she did not argue. She did not defend herself. She just nodded quietly. "I am sorry, Mama Ruth." The older woman, clearly Bianca's mother-in-law, glared at King Williams with pure hatred. "You, move along. Do not stand in front of this house. You make the whole street look dirty and poor." King Williams bowed his head slightly, still playing his role. "I am going, ma'am. Thank you again," he said to Bianca. But as he walked away slowly, he looked back one more time. Bianca was standing there with her head down, broom in hand, while her mother-in-law continued to scold her loudly. The little boy, Caleb, stood holding his broken robot, looking sad and confused. King William's heart was deeply stirred. This woman, Bianca, had almost nothing. She was clearly being treated harshly in her own home. She was poor and struggling, yet she still found it in her heart to give water to a stranger she thought was beneath her in every way. He walked further down the street, but his mind stayed fixed on that small house with peeling paint. He needed to know more. He needed to see if this kindness was real or just a moment of weakness. He needed to test her heart. Over the next 4 days, King Williams returned to that same street. He wore the same clothes, carried the same garbage bag, walked the same route at the same times, and each time he watched carefully. On the second day, he saw Bianca washing clothes by hand in a large plastic basin outside the house. Her hands were red and raw from the harsh soap. Her back was bent from the work. Caleb sat beside her on an overturned bucket, trying to do his homework on a piece of cardboard balanced on his knees. When the boy struggled with a math problem, Bianca stopped washing and moved closer to him. Her voice was patient and gentle as she helped him understand, even though she looked completely exhausted, even though her own hands were pruned and sore from hours of scrubbing. A neighbor walking past stopped to gossip with another woman on the street, and King Williams, pretending to pick up trash nearby, heard every word clearly. Poor Bianca, the first neighbor said, shaking her head. Her husband treats her like she is nothing more than a servant. He is always out drinking and gambling away whatever money she manages to earn. The second neighbor nodded. And that wicked mother-in-law. She controls everything in that house. Bianca works like a slave cleaning other people's houses, and Mama Ruth takes almost all the money. The poor girl barely gets to keep anything for herself or her son. King William's jaw tightened, so she was trapped, suffering. Yet she still smiled, still gave. On the third day, King Williams decided to test her heart more directly. He walked up to the house, deliberately stumbling a little. He dropped his garbage bag and sat down heavily on the curb, breathing hard, pretending to be in pain. Bianca, who was hanging wet clothes on a makeshift line strung between two poles, saw him immediately. She dropped the shirt she was holding and ran over without hesitation. "Sir, are you all right?" she asked, kneeling beside him on the dirty curb, not caring that her knees were touching the ground. King Williams groaned softly, playing his part. "My chest just need to rest a moment." Without a second thought, Bianca called to her son. "Caleb, quickly, bring me water. Hurry, baby." The boy ran inside and came back within seconds, carrying a plastic cup filled with water. Bianca held it carefully to King William's lips. "Drink slowly, sir, slowly. You will be okay." At that exact moment, Mama Ruth came storming out of the house like an angry bull. "Bianca, what in God's name are you doing now?" "Mama, he is not feeling well," Bianca said quickly, her voice nervous but firm. "He just needs a moment to rest. So what? Is he your father? Is he your responsibility?" Mama Ruth's voice was cruel and mocking. "Let him go to the hospital. Stop wasting our time and our water on every beggar who sits in front of this house." Bianca's voice was soft but steady. "Mama, please. He is a human being. Just a few minutes." Mama Ruth made a disgusted sound in her throat and turned back toward the house, muttering curses under her breath about stupid girls who did not know their place. King Williams looked up at Bianca. Her eyes were wet with unshed tears, but she did not let them fall. She just stayed with him, one hand gently on his shoulder, until he said he felt better. "Thank you," he said quietly, looking directly into her eyes. "You have a very good heart, young lady." Bianca shook her head. "I just did what anyone should do, sir. We all need help sometimes." But King Williams knew better. Not everyone would do it. In fact, most of the people he had encountered over the past 3 days would not have done it. They would have walked past. They would have looked away. They would have pretended not to see. On the fourth day, King Williams did not approach the house. Instead, he watched from a distance as Bianca left early in the morning. Carrying a small bag and holding Caleb's hand, they walked several blocks to a bus stop. He followed carefully, staying far enough behind that they would not notice him. Bianca took 2 buses to reach a wealthy neighborhood on the other side of the city. She left Caleb with an elderly woman who ran a small, informal daycare out of her apartment. Then she went to a large, beautiful house with manicured lawns and expensive cars in the driveway. King Williams watched as Bianca entered through the back door, clearly there to work as a cleaning lady. He waited outside for over an hour, then saw Bianca come out briefly to take trash to the curb. A woman in designer clothes, clearly the homeowner, followed her outside and began yelling, "You missed a spot in the bathroom, and the floors are not shiny enough. Do you even know how to clean properly? Maybe I should find someone else who actually knows how to do their job." Bianca apologized softly, her head bowed. "I am very sorry, Mrs. Patterson. I will redo it right away." King Williams felt anger rise in his chest. This woman, Bianca, worked so hard for so little. She was insulted and mistreated everywhere she went, yet she remained kind. She remained gentle. That evening, King Williams returned to the palace. He took off the dirty clothes, washed his hands and face, and put on his royal robe. He sat in his study for a long time, deep in thought. He had found her, the woman with a true heart. But there was a significant problem. She was married. She had a son. She had a life, even if it was a difficult and painful one. He called for his head of security, a man named Gregory, who had served the royal family for over 20 years and could be trusted with anything. "Gregory," the king said seriously, "I need you to investigate someone for me. Quietly, very quietly. I need to know everything about a woman named Bianca who lives on Oakwood Street in the Eastern District. I need to know about her husband, her family situation, everything, but no one must know I am asking. Do you understand?" Gregory bowed deeply. "Yes, Your Majesty. I will be extremely discreet." 3 days later, Gregory returned with a detailed report. King William sat behind his desk, listening carefully to every word. "Your Majesty," Gregory began, consulting his notes, "the woman's full name is Bianca Hartley. She is 27 years old. She was married at the age of 19 to a man named Marcus Hartley. He works sporadically as a truck driver but spends most of his income on gambling and alcohol. He is rarely home, and when he is present, he is verbally and sometimes physically abusive toward his wife." King William's face hardened. "Continue." "She lives with her mother-in-law, Ruth Hartley, who controls the household with an iron fist. Bianca works as a domestic cleaner for 3 different families in the Western District to earn money, but her mother-in-law takes approximately 80% of her wages. Bianca is allowed to keep very little for herself and her son. Her son Caleb is 6 years old. She is trying desperately to save money to eventually send him to a better school, but under her current circumstances it is nearly impossible." King Williams closed his eyes. His heart ached. This woman was trapped in a situation that seemed hopeless. "One more thing, Your Majesty," Gregory added carefully. I spoke to several neighbors and people who know the family. They all say the same thing. Bianca is kind, respectful, and incredibly hardworking, but she is treated like an unpaid servant in her own home. Most people in the neighborhood feel sorry for her, but do not know how to help. King Williams opened his eyes and nodded slowly. Thank you, Gregory. That will be all for now. I need time to think. After Gregory left, King William sat alone in his study for hours. He could not simply take Bianca away from her life. That would be wrong and potentially dangerous, but he also could not stand by and do nothing while she suffered. Then an idea came to him, a careful, strategic idea. The next morning, King William sent Gregory back to Oakwood Street, this time dressed as a representative from a charitable foundation. Gregory knocked on the door of Bianca's house. Marcus, the husband, answered. He was a tall man with bloodshot eyes and the unmistakable smell of cheap alcohol on his breath, even though it was only 10 o'clock in the morning. Yeah? What do you want? Marcus asked rudely, leaning against the door frame. Gregory smiled politely and professionally. Good morning, sir. My name is Gregory Anderson. I represent the Charleston Community Foundation. We are looking for a woman named Bianca Hartley. We have heard from several sources that she is an exceptionally hardworking and honest person. We would like to offer her a position. Marcus's eyes narrowed with suspicion, but also with interest. Anything involving money got his attention. A position? What kind of position? A live-in position at a specialized care facility for elderly residents? Gregory lied smoothly, using the cover story King Williams had carefully crafted. The facility is run by a very wealthy philanthropist. Mrs. Hartley would be paid 3 times what she currently earns from her cleaning jobs, plus she would receive free housing and meals for herself and her son. There is also an excellent school nearby that her son could attend at no cost. Marcus's greedy mind immediately started calculating. If Bianca was gone, he would have more freedom to do whatever he wanted, and if she was earning significantly more money, she could send some of it back to him. How much money are we talking about exactly? Marcus asked, trying to sound casual but failing to hide his interest. Gregory named a monthly salary that made Marcus's eyes go wide. It was more money than Marcus had ever seen at one time in his entire life. Let me talk to her about it, Marcus said, suddenly much more cooperative. Bianca was called from the back of the house, where she had been scrubbing floors. When she heard the offer, she was deeply confused and frightened. Leave her home? Go somewhere completely unfamiliar? Live under a stranger's roof? Then Bianca pictured Caleb, an actual school, a safe room, steady meals, and maybe the first chance to save money without it being snatched away the same day. Can I have a little time to think? She asked so softly it was almost a breath. Of course, Gregory replied gently, but I need to be upfront. This position is highly sought after, and other candidates are in consideration. We'll need your answer within 24 hours. That night, Bianca didn't sleep at all. She lay on her thin mattress in the cramped room she shared with Caleb, staring at the ceiling while her thoughts chased each other in circles. She prayed. She cried into her sleeve so she wouldn't wake her son. She weighed the life she was living against the future she feared, because if nothing changed, nothing would ever change. Was this a blessing sent straight from God, or a trap that could swallow her whole? By morning her choice was made. When Gregory returned the next day like he promised, Bianca drew a shaky breath and nodded. "I'll take the position," she said quietly, swallowing the lump in her throat. "For my son. For Caleb." A few days later, a clean, comfortable car arrived to collect them. Bianca had been told they were headed to the care facility where she would work, so she packed everything they owned into 2 small bags and held them tight like they were all that kept her grounded. As the car rolled through neighborhoods that grew prettier with every turn, her stomach tightened with nervous dread. "Sir," she said to the driver, trying to keep her voice steady, "are you sure we're going the right way? This doesn't look like any care facility." The driver glanced at her in the mirror and smiled kindly. "You'll understand very soon, ma'am. Just trust me a little longer." Minutes later, the car swung toward enormous iron gates and climbed a long driveway lined with towering trees. At the top sat a palace, an actual palace, white columns, fountains spraying crystal arcs, and gardens so perfect they looked painted. Bianca's mouth went dry. Her heart hammered so hard it hurt. "Mama," Caleb whispered, pressing his face to the window, eyes wide with wonder, "is this a castle? Are we in a movie?" The car stopped at the grand entrance, and a woman in an elegant uniform opened the door with a warm, practiced smile. "Welcome, Mrs. Hartley," she said politely. "His Majesty has been expecting you." Bianca's knees nearly buckled. His Majesty?" she stammered. "I don't understand. There has to be some mistake." Still dazed, she was guided inside, with Caleb gripping her hand, both of them overwhelmed by the beauty surrounding them. As they stepped into halls that smelled of polished wood and something floral and expensive,